Hello everybody and welcome back. As always, I'm Mateo311 and this is your channel for everything VR related. Today, we're looking back on all of the VR games that released in 2024 and I'm doing my first ever tier list. We have over 20 games that I'll be ranking from F to S, and like normal, if you agree, disagree, or feel that I neglected any major titles, please let me know down in the comments. Now there are of course links and timestamps if you want to skip ahead, and I'll be moving through this list chronologically, starting with games that released in January of 2024. And first up, we have a controversial one, Bulletstorm VR. This is a port of the over-the-top, action-oriented first-person shooter from 2011. You play as a muscle-bound hero on a mission of revenge. The game's full of gratuitous violence and some childish vulgarity. In 2024, this feels like a game from a completely different era, and it doesn't land as well with the current audience. For me personally though, I thought it was a bit nostalgic and just enjoyed the mindless mayhem. After the slow start, I definitely got into it, and I really enjoy the array of unique weapons and how the game rewards you for killing enemies in a unique fashion. Now, if I was rating this based on its original release, depending on the platform you played the game on, it would be anywhere from a C+ to a B-. Luckily though, the developers did acknowledge the fact that their game was kind of broken and not only fixed the majority of bugs, but also gave us new content and updated graphics. So I'm going to leave Bulletstorm VR right in the B tier. Now the next game is the dystopian future, mech-controlling roguelike Underdogs. I absolutely loved every aspect of this game. The physics-based combat is not only highly engaging, but it also delivers a fantastic sense of impact. The dystopian world of New Bracca is just dripping with style, and the risk versus reward roguelike elements make every run feel unique. My only original complaint was that this game was a bit too short. However, since the game initially released back in February, they've given us multiple updates, including a sandbox mode where you could build your own arenas, and I know they still have a few additional updates in store for us. So I'm going to happily slide this game into the A tier because I love it, but there's an argument to be made that it's a B+. Now moving on to another controversial title, we have Stranger Things VR. This is an action-adventure title that takes place between multiple different seasons of Netflix's TV series, and for the first time we get to watch things unfurl from the perspective of the antagonist. That's right, you actually play through this game as Vecna, experience some of his childhood traumas, and watch him climb the power in the Upside Down. As a fan of Stranger Things, I genuinely enjoyed this title, but mechanically it doesn't offer up anything special. The combat's okay, some people might refer to this as a walking simulator, and if the overall storyline and delivery doesn't land for you, you won't enjoy it. Regardless of all of that though, I'm going to place this in the B tier. Let's call it a B-, and if you're a fan of the TV show and enjoy some interactive storytelling, you should enjoy this one. Now next up is a sequel that I didn't enjoy as much as I expected to. Swarm 2 takes the original Spider-Man with guns experience in a new direction, this time moving into a roguelike experience. So gone are those extremely challenging linear levels, replaced by a much larger rotating series of levels where you're tasked with more than just battling enemies. You also have a full leveling system and additional perks, but as good as this sounds on paper, something about the sequel just doesn't feel as good as the original. It's hard to put my finger on what exactly feels off, but something between the pacing and overall mechanics just don't deliver on this one. While I did have fun with the game, I would still recommend the original over the sequel, and I'm unfortunately going to have to drop this title in the C tier. Things get even worse with my next title, Paint the Town Red. I honestly went in with some high hopes on this one, thinking it would be a goofy, fun time, and maybe even a bit cathartic as I slapped some pixely enemies around. In reality though, it was just exceedingly bland. The combat physics were way off, making one of the best weapons in the game a simple stool. Even with the game having multiple different modes, including an arena from massive battles, a creepy themed roguelike experience, and just some differently themed scenes for you to battle enemies through, none of this elevated the title for me at all. Due to severe boredom, I'm dropping this game right in the D tier. But let's turn things around and get right back on track with Max Mustard. This was a brand new platforming experience from the team that brought us Richie's Plank experience. Overall, they did a fantastic job. The game had a host of unique elements we don't typically see, and most importantly, it was a lot of fun to play. Unfortunately though, it's just not quite as good as the two top tier VR platformers out there, which are Moss and Astrobot. But if that's your competition, being second place isn't bad, and that's why I'm sliding this game right into the A tier. Now next up we have a title that I didn't expect to enjoy, and that's Medieval Dynasty New Settlement. I'm definitely not a big fan of the whole survival genre, and graphically this game is nothing to brag about. I did however find it oddly addicting. Mechanically everything works well and feels right, and there are some nice little extra touches like waving to an NPC to start a conversation. This was one of those games where time just flew by without me realizing it, and every little thing from building a shelter to killing an animal felt rewarding. On top of that, the game has a nice storyline, and they've added a bunch of updates over time. If you're a fan of survival games, this is an easy recommendation, and I'll happily place this game right in the B tier. But this roller coaster of a list is on its way back down again with Soul Covenant. This is a game that looked awesome in trailers and also had some absolutely amazing storytelling components. Unfortunately though, nothing in this game is up to snuff. Even though you have one of the coolest VR weapons I've ever seen, which is a sword that's made from the spine of your fallen companions. But you'll take that blade into extremely bland combat, and what should have been some all-time anime-style storytelling is also squandered. This intriguing concept of these evolving machines that you're battling against as part of an elite squad basically goes nowhere. So it fails on both the storytelling and overall combat, placing this game right into the D tier. But things definitely pick back up with the Battle Royale Contractors Showdown. This is 40 players on a gigantic map trying to take each other out with military style equipment. This was an excellent change of pace for the Battle Royale community because the only other real option out there is Population 1, which offers up a much more arcadey style of gameplay. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the Battle Royale genre itself, but I was really impressed with what they pulled off. Mechanically, the game feels great, there's plenty of unlockables to keep you addicted, and they've continued to pump out new updates. Now, based on what I played, I would slide this into the A tier, but it's been a while since I've jumped back in, so I'm not sure what the current status is and where the player base is at. So if you're still playing Showdown, let me know what you think about the current state of it down in the comments. Now for the horror fans out there, Madison VR is an absolute must play. The VR port of a beloved flat screen game definitely delivers. Not only is it absolutely terrifying, with both a truly creepy atmosphere, but also plenty of jump scares. There's also a compelling storyline with some nice twists and turns, and this is easily one of the best looking horror games to come to VR. If you're a horror fan, I 100% recommend this title, but due to its lack of mainstream appeal and not really bringing anything new to VR, I'm going to slide this into the B tier. Now, games don't need to be groundbreaking to be good, they just need to be fun to play with solid mechanics, and that's where we get Silent Slayer. Rather than your typical escape room, Shell Games turns things around and gives you a break-in style title. You'll play as a vampire slayer who needs to eliminate his foes while they're sleeping in their coffin. It starts off simple enough, but as you move up the vampire hierarchy, you'll find their coffins protected with more and more traps, and one wrong move will get you killed. If you enjoy some casual style gameplay with a bit of a horror twist, it's an easy recommendation, and we'll put Silent Slayer in the B tier because it's extremely fun and offers up a lot for only $19.99. Now, another nice unexpected release that we got in 2024 was Witchblood. This was an extremely early VR title that released all the way back in the Rift and Oculus Go days. It's inspired by games like Metroid and Castlevania, and now it's been remastered for the Quest 3 with upgraded textures and a brand new mixed reality mode. I'm really happy that they brought this title back because the VR community back then was not large enough to do this game justice, and I'm really happy to see that plenty of additional VR gamers can get into this title. It offers up about 6+ hours of exploration and combat, and it not only plays great, but looks great also. This is definitely worth checking out if you're a fan of those old school side-scrolling games like Castlevania or Metroid. But there's nothing here that makes the title exceptional, so we're going to place it in the B tier. Now prepare to jump down a few notches with The Burst. This is a story-driven first-person shooter that has you navigating through a Mad Max-style desert world with the help of both a grappling hook and some interesting vehicles. Now from the trailers, this game looked like it was going to be pretty awesome, but in practice, it fails on multiple levels. Not only was it released really buggy, with many issues still remaining months later, it just also wasn't fun to play. The graphics and combat were bland, mechanically it was pretty janky, and the title should have received a lot more love before it was released. I definitely can't recommend this one, and we're going to drop it into the D tier. Now next up, we have the co-op roguelike mech shooter Big Shots. I was really looking forward to this one because I absolutely love the art style, and I also felt like co-op would help revitalize the overplayed roguelike gameplay style. It's a lot more fun to do the same thing over and over again when you have a buddy at your side. Now in some ways the game definitely delivered. The art style definitely works in VR, controlling the mech feels great, and I love the weapon upgrades that you get over time, but it definitely gets grindy and feels way too repetitive. There's still some excellent fun to be had here, but your time or money can be spent better elsewhere. So I'm going to place this game into the C tier, but I really want to give it like a C+ to B-. Now the next game I was hoping would be in the A tier, but if you tried this one, you'll know that's definitely not the case. The combination stealth first-person shooter title Hitman 3 VR Reloaded was the third attempt at bringing this game to VR, and probably the worst one yet. Performance is extremely poor, while both having reprojection and extremely terrible graphics. Mechanically, it feels like VR is only half implemented, as you still have button presses for many of the major interactions. The Quest version is truly the worst way to experience this really great game. Now there's a new PlayStation VR 2 version on the way, which will be the fourth attempt to finally give us a good Hitman VR title. Until then though, this game sits in the D tier. But a port But that was done way better is the rhythm shooter Metal Hellsinger. While the graphics on the Quest version definitely aren't brag-worthy, mechanically the game feels excellent. You take on the role of a half-demon gunslinger called the Unknown. From there, you'll start blasting through all the demons of hell with some glorious heavy metal music playing in the background. On the fun level, this is a 10 out of 10 for me, but it doesn't really bring anything new to the table, so I'm going to drop it right in the B tier. Now, speaking of fun, Vertigo Games remade one of their classic shooters, Arizona Sunshine. Arizona Sunshine was the original zombie shooter, and it was way ahead of its time. It was one of the first full VR campaigns, and since it released, they gave us multiple different DLCs and a whole new Horde mode. Unfortunately though, since the game released so early, not much of the VR community had tried it, so I'm glad that this game was remade with current generation graphics. You could also play through the entire campaign in co-op, so this is a definite recommendation for anyone looking for a story-driven first-person shooter that doesn't take itself too seriously. It still has a little bit of the game's original jank to it, but even then I would say the game is still great, and I'd place it in the B+ tier. Now, another nice port surprise of 2024 was Triangle Strategy. This is a story-driven, turn-based tactical RPG with over 40 hours of content. They also added a mixed reality mode that makes the experience look like a tabletop board game. Now, I personally love turn-based RPGs, as the tactical combat is just so rewarding. There's also a massive storyline and a robust team leveling system. I will say though that this game is definitely not for everybody. It's extremely story heavy, which is only delivered in this old school 2D style cartoony world. So as great as this game is, it's for a very specific niche audience. Now, if you are a fan of tactical RPGs, definitely check it out. And I'm going to put this in the B to B+ tier. But if we are looking for mainstream appeal, 2024's biggest title was Batman Arkham Shadow. From Camouflage, the same studio that gave us Iron Man VR, this time they're letting us don the cape and become the Dark Knight. If you've played any of the flat screen Arkham titles, you'll know what you're in for. This game is not only set in that same series, taking place shortly after Arkham Origins, but it also features some of the same voice actors, and mechanically this is a perfect translation of the flat screen title into VR. From top to bottom, this game is just great. The graphics are awesome, mechanically it feels amazing, and it does make you feel like that iconic hero. The storyline is solid, and this game has some of the highest production value of any VR titles ever made. So based on all of that, Batman becomes our first S tier title. I'm sure many of people will disagree, but that always happens with some of the biggest games, and you honestly wouldn't believe how many people have told me that Half-Life Alyx just isn't good at all. Now, following Batman, we got another huge title that definitely surprised me, and that was Metro Awakening. This is a story-driven first-person shooter set in the Metro universe, where the surface of Earth has been irradiated, and humanity has been forced to live underground and fend for themselves against some monstrous creatures. It's a really dark world where not only do you have to fight against these monstrous creatures, but humans are equally as dangerous, as it's been broken up into scavenging tribes and some cult extremists. There's also apparently some even darker things lurking in this world. Overall, the game hits on just about all cylinders with very few misses, and I'll happily slide this game into the A tier. But not every game is a masterpiece, and that's where we move on to Starship Troopers Continuum. In truth, the game is actually better than I expected, as it's a story-driven shooter set 20 years into the future of the original movie, and they've added in some fun multiplayer co-op, plus a massive leveling system. I found the concept of the overall storyline to be really cool. The combat's fun enough, and this is a really good experience with a bunch of friends, but it also gets to be a bit grindy, a little stale, and the graphics plus number of enemies on screen at one time is just not enough to do the Starship Troopers franchise justice. So if you have a bunch of friends that want to play through an experience together, it might be worth looking into, but I'll only consider this a C tier game. I was, however, a little bit more impressed with Ember Souls than I thought I would be. This is a story-driven action-adventure title that gives you some Prince of Persia-style parkour, focuses on physics-based melee combat, and also gives you a bunch of spell-like abilities. Combat-wise, it really reminded me of earlier versions of Blade and Sorcery, and I enjoyed both the storyline and parkour. The game, however, does have a very indie feel, with a decent amount of jank. When it's good, it could be really good, and at other times, it's just kind of meh. For $24.99, the game definitely offers up a lot, but it ends up being a jack-of-all-trades, master of none. I want to place this at C+, the B-, but I'll end up dropping it in the B tier, because I'm inspired by the developer's ambition. There's a lot of features in there for only $24.99, and I did enjoy my overall experience. Now, next up, we have a kick-ass game that could easily be A tier if it delivers a solid campaign. As it stands right now, the 4v4 mech shooter Iron Rebellion only offers up PvP. This was an indie game 7 years in the making by only 2 developers. Regardless of that fact, this game is still excellent on so many different levels. There's a massive array of mechs and weaponry, which provides multiple different strategic opportunities in combat. The overall action is intense, and they did an excellent job utilizing motion controls. My only complaint is I want a single player campaign, or maybe even a co-op campaign. That would be amazing. I'm hoping some publisher will pick them up and fund a single player campaign, and if that happens, I expect to slide this into the A tier one day, but for right now, it's gonna be a solid B. Now we're almost done with today's list, but if you noticed I skipped Behemoth, which I'll go back to later. For now, let's get into the latest title, Alien Rogue Incursion. This is another story-driven first-person shooter, which actually takes place chronologically right around the flat-screen title Alien Isolation. But rather than playing cat and mouse with a xenomorph like that game does, this time you're bringing the fight to them as you take on the role of Zula Hendricks, a colonial marine. So those aliens are still absolutely terrifying and can easily kill you, but you're packing plenty of firepower and you won't spend any time hiding. Now the current release is still a bit buggy, specifically on PC VR, but I definitely enjoyed this game and they did an amazing job recreating all the graphical and audio aspects from the Alien franchise. I would wait for some patches, but even with all the issues, this is a solid B. And finally, let's end this video off with Behemoth. Now I saved it for last because I actually didn't finish it yet. I was away for when this game had its very rocky release, and then I decided to wait for the day 7 patch. Now since then, I've put in a few hours into the game, and will say it's pretty damn fantastic. I'm currently playing on the Quest 3, and I'm surprised at the overall graphics quality. The combat also feels great, and battling those behemoths is truly epic. The game does, however, feel a bit bland every once in a while, and some of the grappling controls still don't feel right to me, even after a decent amount of practice. I'm inclined to believe this game is going to end up in the A tier, but I still have a few more hours to go. So I'm curious to hear from you guys, was Behemoth an A tier game? And also let me know where you agreed or disagreed with me throughout this entire list, and if I neglected any major releases, definitely let me know what they were. I'll just finish off with a quick few shout outs of games that I know I didn't talk about, but on the mixed reality side, The Last Stand and Spatial Ops were really solid experiences. And while I didn't finish both Action Hero or Vendetta Forever just yet, I'm definitely enjoying both of those titles and feel like they'll also end up in the B tier. And that was today's video. If you enjoyed it, please go ahead and give me a thumbs up. If you're new here, consider subscribing. And as always, I'll see you guys on next time.